The tour guide that we had on the boat had named this seagull Tonto and liked feeding him cheese. Yes, we are on the hunt for seals and porpoise and puffins. Planning and preparation. Two things that are going to be very important for an upcoming trip that I've actually got tomorrow. So I'm just sorting out kit at the moment. And this trip, which has been in the works for a couple of months, that's how early you have to book tickets for it, is a trip over to Skomer Island. Skomer has the largest colony of puffins in southern Britain, so it's quite a big deal and it's very popular as a destination for photographers. Planning, obviously that's been in the works for a couple of months now. We bought tickets ages back because they sell out very quickly, and in terms of when you've got to book tickets, puffins tend to come onto land around about April and start nesting in May. And then June and July, you've got a little bit of activity as well. So there's a very small window in the year where Skomer has thousands of puffins, like tens of thousands of puffins. So in terms of challenges while we're on the island, I don't think there's going to be much of an issue finding a subject, but there's a lot of preparation that has to go into making sure I've got all of the right kit, that I've got it all with me, and that it all works. So the main things that I need to worry about are SD cards and batteries. I'll go through some of the kit that I'm going to be taking, but the main workhorse is going to be this boy right here. So this is the Lumix G9 with an Olympus 12 to 200mm lens. So that is going to give me a nice wide focal range and quite a good sort of medium to long telephoto range as well, in a very, very portable package. I mean, if I hold it up again, that's 200mm, that's 12 or 24 to 400. For Micro Four Thirds. My other camera that I'm going to be taking is a Lumix GX8, and I'm going to have a Sigma 16mm, so that'll be the equivalent of 32mm. Doing a little bit of research, the puffins are everywhere, and you're confined to a small track, so you stay on a path that goes around the island, and the puffins are kind of everywhere, and they will walk next to you and past you. So you've got to kind of avoid them, but it means that they'll get quite close, hence the portrait lens. I'm also going to take a 25mm lens, which is the equivalent of 50mm, so a nifty 50. In order to achieve a successful day of photography, where I don't want to faff, I want to eliminate as much faff as possible. I briefly mentioned in my last video that I like to have things that I use accessible to me without having to take my bag off. So in terms of backpack, I'll be using the Mindshift backlight. This is a 26 litre and very, very common nowadays, but I've got a Peak Design capture clip on the strap. And then on the other side, I've got a phone pouch. So on top of that, so I've got phone on one side, camera clipped on the other side. I do have a second camera clip on the hip belt of that bag, so that's where the GX8 is going to be. So I've got my two cameras and my phone accessible, but there's a couple of other things that I use throughout the day, mainly because I've started doing more video work and vlogging as I go. So I tend to use one of these. So this is a DJI Osmo Pocket 3. This camera's great. And then my other camera is this titchy little thing, which when it came out in, I think 2021 or 2020, something like that, it got a lot of stick because when it shoots in 4K, it gets really hot, and I have experienced that as well. But that's normally indoor shooting. So what I tend to do with this is shoot in 2.7K, so you have the ability to crop in when you need to, and while you're shooting outdoors, it doesn't tend to overheat. But this thing's brilliant because when you use it on a head strap or something, it's very unobtrusive and very light. As I was saying, I like having things easy access without having to take my bag off. This accessory that I've recently purchased, one of these. So this is not going to win you any fashion awards. This is a chest pack, so you'll wear it on your chest. I'm going to be using the chest pack to store all of my extra camera bits that I need to use on the fly, so that when we're walking around I can kind of just focus on the photography and the bits of video that I'm going to be taking. After signing in and collecting our tickets up at the lodge, we made our way down to where the boat picks you up. Now, I believe there's only around 5 boats per day with roughly 50 people per boat. So 250 people maximum are allowed on Skomer each day. So while the boat looks very busy, by the time we actually got onto the island and started walking, we managed to get ahead of a couple of people. It quietens down quite quickly, which is good. The boat trip itself lasts around 10 to 15 minutes to get over to Skomer. It's very close to the coastline, the island. In this bit of b-roll here, you can see a seagull that was also present on our trip back as well. The tour guide that we had on the boat had named this seagull Tonto and liked feeding him cheese. Once we arrived at Skomer, we had quite a few stairs to climb to get up to the island. There was a very brief talk about a couple of ground rules about which direction you can walk and where to go and whatnot. So after we listened to that, we just made a move and started walking to the good spots. Fairly centrally located, there's an old farm complex, which is kind of the hub that you go to, and you end up coming back here a couple of times as well. On our way to this, we did actually see a short-eared owl. The photo I got wasn't phenomenal, but all things considered, we only saw this owl briefly and didn't see another one for the entire day, but they are on this island. So what was the weather supposed to be today?
15 degrees?
15, windy.
No, it wasn't meant to be windy.
Was it not meant to be windy?
No.
Oh.
There was like a slight breeze like there is now.
Yeah, I mean, I'd barely say there's a breeze. It's roasting out here.
It is.
Good day for it though, and the bluebells back in that field were amazing. Yes, we are on the hunt for seals and porpoise and puffins,
That lady spot something.
and then there's loads of other seabirds around as well. It didn't take us very long to spot some seals sunbathing in the morning, so that was quite nice. We didn't really see any after this though, so we were quite lucky to get these guys out of the water on the rocks. Little did we know at this point that we would actually end up walking around most of the island before we saw any puffins. We did actually see quite a lot of their burrows, and it looks like some of the older ones made these really interesting sort of mound structures as well, where the grasses start to grow back over the excavated soil. So that's quite cool and made for quite a nice photo. But we did see quite a lot of other wildlife, but in terms of puffins, it was very, very quiet for maybe the first 40 minutes to first hour. Way off in the distance here, you could see one of the ferries that was probably going over to Pembroke. I think this is one of the ones that makes a trip over to Ireland. This was where we first spotted the puffins, and to be fair, this was actually the most active part of the island for them. So we ended up hanging about here quite a lot and came back here after we had our lunch as well, and we got a lot of good photos and a lot of good videos, and they're very characterful little birds. When we'd been planning this trip, there were two photos that I really wanted to do my best to get. One of them was to get a picture of a puffin, a nice portrait shot where they've got sand eels, which are a type of fish. If you have seen a picture of a puffin, odds on you've seen a picture of one with sand eels in its mouth. Unfortunately, I think I only actually saw one puffin with sand eels the whole day. So in that sense, I was a bit unlucky. But the second type of photo that I wanted to get was one of the puffins in flight or coming into land. Now, this is particularly difficult because they're quite quick. They can fly at around about 50 kilometers an hour and they come into land very quickly. You can see that there's quite a big sort of trench just off in the distance where a lot of the seabirds were nesting or fishing. So they'd pop up from the cliff and land fairly quickly. This meant that there were a lot of failed attempts trying to get a puffin coming in for landing, and here's just a few of them. So it was very difficult to get one of those shots, but I did manage to get a couple, which I was quite pleased with. The way that I shot these was I was kind of focusing on areas where a lot of puffins were landing, and then I was fixing my focus on that spot, and then when they came in I'd try and get some photos, but as I said, they're very, very quick. Other than that, with it being spring, there's loads of nice colours and there are a lot of nice bluebells dotted about, so I tried very hard to get photos of puffins with the bluebells just to get a nice colour contrast. At this stage, we'd made it back to where the boat was going to pick us up from, but we were a little bit early, so we had some time to kill, which meant we could take some more photos of puffins in flight. Again, this was quite difficult as they move really quickly, but it was still quite nice to see them in flight, and I did manage to grab at least one good photo. So here we're making our way back down the stairs, and you can see our boat in the distance coming over to pick us up. And as I said earlier, there's about 50 people per boat, so it looks really busy here, but while we were on the island it felt very sparsely populated, which is quite good, and it obviously means that the area gets protected as well. This was a good opportunity though. There was a razorbill that was just sat very close to where the boat ended up landing, so managed to get a couple of good snaps of him. And with that, we were back on the boat with Tonto the seagull, heading back over to the mainland of Pembrokeshire. All in all, it was a fantastic day. We were on the island for about 5 hours, and in total I took 1,305 photos, which sounds like quite a lot, but when you break it down, it's only around about 4 per minute, so not a huge amount. Within that, of course, there were quite a few images that were duds, either not in focus or just not very good. But if you got to this point in the video, you'll hopefully have seen quite a lot of the photos did come out quite nicely, which I'm very pleased with. So in terms of a day out for wildlife photography, I would highly recommend going to Skomer. Obviously, you're going to need to plan in advance quite a bit to book these tickets, as they do sell out very quickly, and then you have to hope that the weather is good as well. Even if you're not doing photography, it's nice to get up close to wildlife, and the puffins really don't mind people at all. They don't see you as a threat, so they do just sort of waddle around you, which is quite cool. Now, in terms of the photos themselves, they're not the most unique. I'm very happy with them, but of course, there were a lot of photographers on our boat, so that means there are a lot of photographers on the other 4 boats, and this runs all the way through the Puffin season. So the photos you get aren't necessarily going to be the most unique photos in the world, but that's not necessarily always the point. You know, I enjoyed taking the photos. It's still a challenge to get a good composition and get a photo that is interesting and shows off some of the character of the birds, because the puffins do really have a lot of cool, quirky characteristics and are very clumsy as well. So it's a very good day out. I'd recommend it. Even if you don't walk away with that 1 in a million shot that nobody else is going to have, it's still really cool and you will come away with some very good photos, like I did.